The sun sank low over the cracked earth, spilling a molten orange light across the New Mexico plains. Mary Carter stood barefoot on the porch, her dress frayed at the edges, watching the dust swirl up from the horizon like a ghostly storm. The land had once been her mother's pride, rich, fertile, full of promise. Now it was nothing but a dry, dying stretch of dirt. In her trembling hands was the letter from the bank, the one that spelled the end of everything. Her father sat slumped nearby, his weathered face shadowed with shame. He'd done all he could, sold what little cattle they had, bartered tools, begged the neighbors, but $1,500 might as well have been a mountain. The Carter farm would be gone by week's end. A low rumble echoed from the hills. Mary squinted, raising her hand to block the sunlight. A lone rider appeared in the distance, the figure cutting a dark shape against the fading sky. Her heart gave a nervous thud when she recognized the tall silhouette, the steady rhythm of hooves, the horse black as coal. Luke Merritt. The man who owned half the county, the man whose name carried equal parts respect and fear. Her father straightened in his chair, his expression tightening. Luke rode up without hurry, every movement deliberate. When he dismounted, dust swirled around his boots, and for a moment he stood still, hat tipped low, his broad shoulders outlined by the burning sky. He tied the reins to the post, then climbed the porch steps with that slow, confident gait that made Mary's pulse quicken for reasons she didn't understand. "Even in, Mr. Carter," Luke said, voice deep as a canyon. "Heard word you're fixin' to lose your land come Monday." Her father looked down, his voice cracked and low. "Ain't no way around it, Luke. Tried every man I could find. The bank's made up its mind." Luke nodded once, eyes unreadable. "I'll pay it." The words hung in the air, thick and impossible. Mary's breath caught, her heart pounding. You'd do that." He turned toward her, his gaze sharp but calm. "On one condition." Her father frowned, the lines in his face deepening. "What kind of condition?" Luke's eyes never left Mary's. "She marries me. Tonight." Silence. Even the wind seemed to stop. Mary felt the ground tilt beneath her, her fingers tightening around the letter until it crumpled. "You can't be serious." "I'm always serious," he said quietly. "You'll save your father, keep your home, your land. All I want is your hand." Her father stood, his voice shaking. "Luke, that ain't right, she's just a girl." Luke raised a gloved hand. "I ain't forcing nobody. You can both refuse. But come Monday, that land will belong to the bank. And I won't come back to offer again." Mary looked at her father, his shoulders slumped, eyes glassy with despair. She looked at Luke, cold, determined, yet something in his tone carried a strange gentleness, like this wasn't greed but something heavier. Her throat tightened. "If I say yes, you'll pay everything." He nodded. "Before sunrise, it'll be done." The wind moaned through the porch rails as she whispered the word that sealed her fate. "Yes." Luke's jaw flexed, a shadow passing over his face. "Then you're my wife now, Mary Carter." The wedding had been over before Mary could catch her breath. A preacher, half drunk and half asleep, had spoken the vows in a small chapel at the edge of town while the night wind whispered through the cracks in the walls. There were no flowers, no guests, no ring, only the sharp scent of dust and kerosene, and the sound of her heart pounding in her chest. Luke Merritt had stood beside her, hat in hand, his voice calm as he said the words that bound them. She had whispered her, "I do," with tears burning in her eyes, the weight of her choice sinking like a stone in her chest. By morning, she was Mrs. Merritt. They rode together in silence beneath a sky the color of ash, the cold dawn wind whipping through her hair. Luke rode ahead most of the way, straight-backed and steady, the kind of man who spoke little but always meant what he said. She watched him, searching for something human behind that hard jawline, some trace of mercy in the man who had bought her future with a single sentence. When the ranch came into view, Mary's breath caught. It stretched across the valley like a kingdom, dozens of acres of open land, cattle grazing in the distance, barns lined with fresh painted fences. The main house stood tall and proud, 2 stories of stone and oak, with smoke curling lazily from the chimney. It was beautiful, yet it filled her with dread. This was not her home. This was her prison. Luke dismounted first and turned to offer his hand. She hesitated before taking it, her pride forcing her chin up even as her heart trembled. Inside, the air was warm and smelled faintly of tobacco and cedar. The walls were covered in reminders of his life, a rifle mounted above the fireplace, a hat rack carved with initials, the sound of boots echoing faintly from the hall. Everything here spoke of power, of control. "This house is yours now," Luke said, setting his hat down. "You'll want for nothing." Mary's gaze swept the grand room, her voice tight. "Except freedom." He looked at her, the flicker of something unspoken in his eyes. "You agreed to this." She turned sharply toward him, anger rising like wildfire. "You gave me no choice. My father would have lost everything." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he poured himself a glass of whiskey, the sound of it breaking the silence. "Maybe I did you a favor," he said finally, his tone quieter now. "You'll see in time, I ain't the villain you think I am." Her laugh was bitter. "Then what are you, Mr. Merritt?" He stared into the fire for a long moment before answering. "A man who's tired of being alone." Something inside her faltered, just for a heartbeat. There was a truth in his voice that she hadn't expected, raw and weary. But she couldn't let herself soften, not yet. She folded her arms and looked away. Luke placed a folded deed on the table between them. "Your father's debt is gone. The land's paid for. Whatever else you think of me, I kept my word." Mary stared at the paper, her chest tightening with a mix of gratitude and grief. "You did," she whispered. "But that doesn't make this right." He tipped his hat low, eyes shadowed. "Right don't matter much out here, Mrs. Merritt." And with that, he walked out into the morning light, leaving her standing by the fire in a house that suddenly felt far too large and far too empty.